Free agency is officially off and running for the Seahawks, and while it might not be the biggest of names, certainly some important moves coming on the exclusive right free agent front. We're going to be breaking it all down here on our Monday edition, Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our Monday edition by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the show. We've got a jam-packed episode coming your way. We're going to take a look at the first dominoes to fall for the Seahawks in free agency, a couple of exclusive right free agents signing the dotted line, getting tendered, returning in 2026. They could be significant players for Seattle next season. And we're going to wrap up our combine analysis with the day 3 and day 4 winners. We got running backs, receivers, and of course, the big buffet bashers, the offensive linemen up front. Going to be a jam-packed episode, courtesy of our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into a bigger potential win with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Free agency won't officially open for 9 days. We are within single digits, Rob. So free agency is closing in. The Seahawks having their first 2 dominoes fall today. And these were moves that were expected. Basically, they were inevitable because of the rules. But exclusive rights free agents Ty Okada and George Holani receiving exclusive rights free agents tenders. They will sign those. This is not like restricted free agents where teams have the ability to swoop in and match and create other issues like that. Basically, exclusive rights free agents, if the team wants you back, they tender you, you sign it, you come back. That's with Ty Okada and George Holani. And normally with these moves, a lot of times it's bottom of the roster players that were former undrafted signees. You don't normally have very many significant players that are ERFAs. The Seahawks have had a few, obviously, over the years, but I don't know that there has been a more significant set of ERFA moves made by the Seahawks in the last 5-6 years than these two, just because of the landscape free agency-wise for the Seahawks. Rob, you look at George Holani, for example. Right now, he's the most experienced running back that is healthy that's on Seattle's roster, with Ken Walker III set to hit free agency. And then the safety position, Ty Okada started 11 games last year and played at a very high level. He looked more than capable of being a full-time starter in the National Football League. So you've got him with all that experience, and Kobe Bryant is going to free agency. There is a chance that both these guys could be starting for Seattle in week 1 next September. You don't normally say that about exclusive rights free agents. Obviously, a lot could change between now and then, bringing in players of those positions. If Walker and Bryant both are re-signed, that changes the narrative as well. But you have 2 really good undrafted players that have developed into talented role players, borderline starters in case of Okada, that are going to have a chance to potentially step into even bigger roles next year for the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, which is remarkable when you consider the fact that both of these players, of course, were undrafted free agents. They have worked their way up the, up the chain, and were very productive players for the Seahawks when called upon this past season. As you mentioned, Ty Okada started 11 games for the Seahawks. So, I mean, he's just proven basically as it gets. I mean, he was that, the obvious player for opposing quarterbacks and offensive play callers to try to target. And Ty Okada proved that you could try, but that he was going to be able to make some big plays. I thought that his open field tackling really improved as the season went on. We saw the flashes of the big play ability with that spectacular interception that he had in the preseason. I just think that Ty Okada is absolutely a starting caliber safety in the NFL. It gives the Seahawks an awful lot of flexibility in the negotiations with Kobe Bryant. And then the same thing with George Holani at the running back position. Of course, Kenneth Walker III is a free agent, and it provides the Seahawks with a lot of flexibility in those negotiations as well. I thought that George Holani played, one of the more underrated roles in Seattle's Super Bowl victory. I mean, the catches that he made, the pass protection that he provided after that had been a little bit of a question mark. Certainly with Zach Charbonnet going down, that had been one of the things that he had done so well. The way that George Holani stepped up his game in the biggest of big games, the Super Bowl, and the way that Okada did that virtually all season long. I think that, again, you made the point, Corbin, that we just rarely see ERFAs have this much significance. And again, as you said, I mean, there wasn't a lot of suspense here. Of course, the Seahawks were going to bring back these two players, but these are not bottom of the barrel type of players. These are players that, had they been allowed to explore free agency on a more large scale sense, I think that a lot of NFL teams out there would have been very interested in trying to lure those players out of Seattle. Kudos to the Seahawks for not wasting any time, making sure that they have these players in position so that way they don't have to go into the NFL draft or real free agency basically with one hand tied behind their back. They have starting caliber players brought back onto the field already in Okada and George Holani.
Rob, we hear Mike McDonald frequently use the term force multipliers, and a lot of times it's with players like Devin Witherspoon or Leonard Williams, players that you can move around the field, multiple alignments, multiple positions that are impact players. Normally, when you're talking about players like George Holani and Okada, you're not going to be using that kind of verbiage because, again, these are undrafted players coming into the NFL. But I think when you look at them, they don't have the elite skills and talents of players like Devin Witherspoon and Leonard Williams. But I think force multiplier fits both of these guys quite well. When you look at what George Holani brings to the table, you mentioned the pass protection. He had a couple blitz pickups in that Super Bowl that were absolutely fantastic. And the NFC Championship game, I thought he had two of the biggest catches to get Seattle in position to be able to score touchdowns in that game. So he was giving them contributions in that regard. And we've seen the running ability when he's been healthy. That's been the biggest issues. He's had some injuries since Seattle brought him in. And even in college, he had some durability issues. But when he's been healthy and he's been able to play, he also had that touchdown in the end zone on that really bizarre kickoff against the Pittsburgh Steelers that he wisely recovered in the end zone. He's made some big tackles on special teams. From that perspective, he's a force multiplier. The guy can make a difference in a number of different ways. And Okada, he might not be Nick Eamon-Wari where he's going to be playing down in the box 80% of the time and just mashing dudes. But he's a really good tackler. He's an excellent blitzer. He had 1.5 sacks this year. He can play both safety spots. He can go down into the box and you can do a lot of fun things with him. And he's always been a really good special teams player. So I think both these guys, throwing that term out there, I'm not doing it lightly. I think there are a very small number of players that fit that bill in the NFL. And yet I would say both these guys check it off because they might not be elite at any one thing, but both these guys are really good at all around football for their respective positions and special teams.
And they're damn good athletes as well. I mean, George Holani's success at Boise State speaks for itself. I mean, he was a highly productive player. I was stunned, frankly, when he wasn't drafted. And then with Okada, I mean, you look at his workout numbers. I mean, he absolutely deserved to be drafted as well. I just view this as, again, a very savvy scouting department, that got these two players for the Seahawks in the first place. And then the Seattle recognizing what they have with these players and just the versatility that they offer, not only very productive on offensive and defensive respectively, but also very good special teams players as well, as you mentioned with George Holani getting the touchdown, against Pittsburgh. And then Okada, anytime that he has been asked to play in a multitude of special teams roles, that was the biggest reason why I thought that he was going to, make this roster a couple of years ago, was because of the fact that he was basically viewed as a kind of a core 4 special teams team's player. He's become so important on defense at times this season that it forced Seattle to look at him as basically just, quote unquote, just a defensive player rather than using him at special teams at times. But again, they can play those roles. They have the hunger that you're looking for. We're right here on the precipice, of course, Corbin, of the 2026 NFL draft. I think if Ty Okada and George Holani were in this draft, then we'd be talking about middle round prospects in a lot of ways. I mean, I just think that the running back class is not as good as perhaps we've seen a couple of years ago. And so I think that's the lens that John Schneider and the Seahawks are looking at this, is they have players at palatable contract numbers that are already proven in your system, have already bought in and have proven that they can do it at the highest level. So to me, this was easy to forecast that the Seahawks were doing it, but that doesn't mean that they weren't brilliant moves.
And we also have to mention the affordability aspect. I mean, ERFAs are making less than $1 million next year. Ty Okada could be starting for Seattle and playing at a high level as a starter for peanuts. And you'd say the same thing about if George Holani, I mean, Seattle might be looking at this like, do we really want to pay Ken Walker III $13 million when we think George Holani could start for us maybe at $780,000 or whatever that value is? These are things that championship teams have to think about, especially at positions like running back that maybe aren't valued as much in terms of money too. So the affordability is a big part of this too, but having guys that have been in your system that have been great special teams players, again, I don't throw this lightly around. These guys are force multipliers. When you have those as ERFAs, that is when you know you've got a really good roster that you have assembled. So again, kudos to John Schneider, and having these guys available for 2026 is going to be a big deal in the backfield and the defensive backfield for the Seahawks. When we come back, we are going to head back to Indianapolis, not literally, but we're going to talk about the Combine, which wrapped up today. We're going to be diving into the key contributors or the key standouts from the running back and receiver workouts. That'll be coming up next here on our Monday edition, Locked On Seahawks. College basketball is nonstop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night, from early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts. There's always action on the board, and now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay you want, whether that's rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits your read. You can mix spreads, totals, and player props to match how you see the slate playing out, and then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. Go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who were listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the show. Make sure to check out You Live Your Team every single day. Make sure to check out the Everydayer Club for Locked On Seahawks. No interruptions, members-only Discord access, and a chance to speak with Locked On hosts and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. And to sweeten the pot until February 15th, subscribers can jump on board. We've got a special deal on the site for you, so make sure to check it out, lockedonseahawks.supercast.com, or check the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, Rob, the Combine is in the books, but we're not done talking about some of the standouts who shined in Indianapolis, and we're going to go to the skill positions here first, but we're going to say the best for last. The Buffet Bashers coming up later in the show, but I want to take a few moments here to kind of dive into the running backs and receivers that jumped out from this event this year. And it's crazy. You look at this. This was probably the most athletic combine that we have ever seen in terms of testing numbers across the board. You had pretty much every position with the fastest average 40 time or second fastest average 40 time that we have ever seen. At least from a speed standpoint, this was the most athletic combine that there has ever been. And a big part of that was the running back position, where you had both your prerequisite speedy backs and the power backs all running at extremely fast times. And Mike Washington Jr. from Arkansas, he to me was clearly the big winner from this event, a player that's been productive at Arkansas, that had some pretty good tape. There's been some inconsistencies in there, but running a 4.33 40-yard dash, that was not something I was expecting. I thought he might break into the 4.3s, but that low on the spectrum, that was more than I was expecting. And then the vertical jump, the broad jump, you name it, what he tested in, he was elite among the elite in this combine. And that just further cemented his status as a guy that's going to be one of the top running backs that is picked in this year's class.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, when you are as big as he is, I mean, 223 pounds, run 4.33, no player in any position no player in any position over 220 pounds ran as fast as Mike Washington did. And again, when you are that size and you also have elite speed, that obviously is going to be an intoxicating combination for NFL teams. And you mentioned the other tests at which he did. I mean, when you run really fast, that translates very well to the jumps. So a 39-inch vertical jump, again, at over 220 pounds is a remarkable number, as is a 10'8" broad jump. I recently wrote an article for foxsports.com talking about some of the biggest risers and some fallers from the combine workouts. And because his last name starts with a W, of course, then alphabetically, he is going to be among the last players listed there as far as risers. But he really should have been one of the very first players if we were just going off of numbers in terms of impact. Look, there's no doubt about it that even though he wound up actually being faster than Notre Dame's Jeremiah Love by a few hundredths of a second, at the same time, is that the race to be the number 2 running back isn't going to get nearly as much attention as the race to be the number 2 quarterback. But at the same time, I do think that Mike Washington quite literally won that race with the way that he performed. I'm still a big fan of Jadarian Price, who I thought had a solid workout, but his workout was expected, whereas Mike Washington Jr.'s workout, I was not expecting a number, even in the 4.4s, frankly. He does show some breakaway speed, but I didn't think that he had the initial burst to be able to get into the 4.3 type of category. This was an exceptional workout for Mike Washington, one that absolutely turned an awful lot of heads in the media as well as the NFL scouting community.
One other player that I got to mention that exceeded my expectations, because he's more of a, I don't want to say he's a bowling ball running back, but he's closer to that than being a home run threat. And that's Kentucky's Seth McGowan. And seeing him run a sub 4.5, getting into the 4.49 range, I think he dramatically improved his standing, because this was one of the biggest questions. Is he going to be athletic enough where he is going to be able to not necessarily be a home run threat, but is he going to be a guy that can consistently get you 10-yard carries when he has the room to operate? He's going to break tackles. That he's going to be able to create yards after contact. This reaffirms those that did believe he had that kind of speed. And watching the film, I thought he did, but I thought he was going to run in the mid 4.5s, which honestly, to me, the 40-yard dash is going to sound crazy when you have the word running in the position name. The 40-yard dash is one of the things that I care about the least when I'm evaluating running backs. I still look at it, obviously, and it's fun to see these guys run the way they do, but I like looking at that 10-yard split, which McGowan did much better than I thought he was going to do, and the explosiveness. I want explosive players in the backfield. McGowan checked off all those boxes. I thought he had a fantastic combine.
I agree. I'm a big fan of Seth McGowan. There are some off-field stuff that obviously is going to require a lot of investigating. But having listened to his interviews, he has talked openly about some of his prior transgressions. And so if the Seahawks scouts believe in him as much as I do after watching those interviews, then I do think that he is somebody who would fit in nicely into this system. Another player from the running back position that I want to make sure I talk about that I think that some people are going to put on their on their fallers list, frankly. And it's for the same reason that we just talked about, Corbin. At the running back position, I actually don't care so much about the 40-yard dash time, and that's Emmett Johnson. I talked about him, with our combine preview as a back that I was really, really high on. And I kind of, honestly, because it's not my wallet that we're talking about here, I kind of like the fact that his 4.5 second 40-yard dash was the slowest of all the running backs who tested this year. Maybe a player that I think should be a top 50 candidate, maybe he does fall to you at number 64 overall. He led all running backs tested in both the shuttle drills. And so again, you're talking about a guy that can laterally move very, very quickly. I love his instincts. I think back to all of those backs that were very successful under Gary Kubiak during the wide zone system that we saw with the Denver Broncos and the Houston Texans in the past, the Terrell Davises, the Mike Andersons, the Olandis Garys of the world, a bunch of guys that didn't run anything close into the 4.4s of some of the flashier running backs in this class. I remember their vision. I remember their lateral agility and that initial burst. It's funny, Emmett Johnson, again, 4.56 seconds. I'll shout it from the rooftops if that means he's going to fall down the board a little bit for any team that frankly that needs a back that is going to be able to provide you some big play flash to him the way that the Seahawks might need that. But while he had that 4.56 second 40-yard dash time, his 1.59 second 10-yard split was the same one as what Damon Claiborne from Wake Forest, interestingly enough, since that's where Kenneth Walker III began his college career. It's the same one that Damon Claiborne, who ran a 4.37 40-yard dash, but they still had that 1.59 second 10-yard split. So again, what that suggests to me, Corbin, is maybe Emmett Johnson doesn't have that breakaway elite speed that, say, Kenneth Walker III has, but he's got burst. And again, he has the lateral agility to make people miss in the hole and then be able to get yardage in chunks. And I think that is more important to the new the same offense, essentially, the Seahawks are going to be using under a new play caller, of course, in Brian Fleury.
Let's go on to the outside, the receiver position real quick. And I've got a couple names that I'm going to throw out here that we have already talked about in the show in the past, but I'm going to mention them again because I thought they were big winners in this combine event. I've got to start this conversation with Ted Hurst, the 6'3" receiver out of Georgia State. He had a fantastic combine. I was thinking he was probably going to run in the mid 4.4s. He ends up running a 4.42, and this should tell you all you need to know. He wasn't even in the top 12 for wide receivers in this combine in the 40-yard dash. But at 4.42, that is the long speed I'm looking for from a 6'3" receiver that is a viable home run threat, that loves to win over the top, can win the jump ball. I thought Ted Hurst had a really good combine. He tested well in the other events that he participated in as well. So he wasn't just a speed demon. We know that he's got size. And then another one here that I was impressed by, Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana. Not always a guy on film that you necessarily think of as a burner. And maybe in today's era, a 4.42 is not a burner, but that was faster than I thought he might be like JSN and running the low 4.5s, which again is not a bad thing. There are a lot of really good receivers in the NFL that ran low to mid 4.5s that are really good in the change of direction and agility drills. But I did not think Cooper was going to run quite that fast. That's certainly going to be a positive feather to put into his cap going into this draft.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of piggyback that. If we're going to talk about big wide receivers for a moment, Chris Brazell, the second from Tennessee, this is a 6'4", 198-pounder who had a 4.37 second 40-yard dash with a 1.52 second 10-yard split. So again, this is a big receiver who showed immediate burst, better burst than I thought. I mean, you can see the long, lanky speed. He led the SEC with 9 touchdown receptions this past season. But to have that immediate burst off the line is pretty rare for a guy with a 6'4" frame. Jeff Caldwell from Cincinnati may have made as much money as any receiver in this class in terms of what he did. I mean, he had the 4th fastest 40-yard dash time of anybody tested, and the 3 receivers ahead of him were only 30 pounds lighter than than him. So again, he's another one that I think that you have to mention. Deion Burks from Oklahoma, he's kind of the mighty mite. I mean, he's 5'10", 180 pounds. He had a 4.3 with a 1.49 10-yard split. I mean, that was among the fastest of anybody there. I love the fact he also had 26 repetitions of 225 pounds, a 42.5-inch vertical. So while he's short, he is also powerful, and then has some make you miss lateral agility. And finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention University of Washington's Denzel Boston. Now, this is a kid who played at Emerald Ridge High School in the local area, of course, played his college ball at UW, and did not run the 40-yard dash. But talk about the lateral agility. We talked about with running backs. He had a 4.28-second short shuttle, so very good lateral agility. You saw the same thing with the punt return for a touchdown against UC Davis earlier this year during the college football season. I also like that 6'4", a 35-inch vertical jump. It wasn't elite. It almost is like Emmett Johnson. Like if Denzel Boston were to somehow fall down the board a little bit, because I don't expect him to have an elite 40-yard dash time, somewhere in those mid 4.5s, like you mentioned with Jackson Smith and Jibba. But my goodness, when you watch the tape, his ability to get in and out of his breaks, his strong hands, he is a player that I think is going to be a star in the NFL as well.
When we come back, we're going to go away from the small and speedy to the big and speedy, the offensive lineman. This was about as athletic of an O-line combine as you're ever going to see. We're going to jump into these standouts on the trenches coming up next here on our Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people you actually fit and what you're looking for: skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get the job to premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Pint to Pie, the Space Needle. It's the perfect place for a pregame or pre-funk spot before tonight's game or concert. After 4 p.m., the Space Needle's Pint to Pie gives you the whole package: an entree, a savory or sweet tip-top pie, and a pint of beer, wine, or a non-alcoholic drink, all for just $35 per person. Minimum purchase of 2 required. Pint to Pie is your launch pad to game night. Gear up for a cracking home game at Climate Pledge along the Space Needle, Seattle's most iconic destination, not just for the views, but for the evening fun. Rather than trying to cram into a crowded sports bar right beforehand, why not enjoy a little space and a great view while pre-gaming with your favorite cocktail? Look out over the city, look down at Climate Pledge Arena before you go inside, and roll in with the best pregame story in the Emerald City. Whether it's a date night, friend night, or you're just here for the deal of it all, come take your place in the horizon with Pint to Pie. Only $35 per person. Limited time offer, 21 and up only. ID required. Get tickets at spaceneedle.com. Minimum 2 required. Welcome back to the Monday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. With NFL free agency opening up soon, we've got a special promo code for those of you listening to get a free month of Everyday or Club access. It works with either member level. This promo is going to run from March 1st to March 15th. So make sure to check it out. You'll be using the code free agency. It's already up and running for you. Just go to lockedonseahawks.supercast.com and enter in the code free agency. Signing up for the annual plan, your code is going to reduce your price by 1/12, or you can do the monthly plan and get the first month free. Again, that's free agency at lockedonseahawks.supercast.com. All right, Rob, let's dive into the offensive line showings at the combine. And look, everybody wants the speed demons. They want the guys that are running in the 4.2s and the 4.3s. But I think it's more impressive when we see the big fellas get after it. And I don't think a lot of people realize how fast a 5.25 second 40-yard dash really is. Like 99.5% of the world is not going to touch that speed in the 40-yard dash. And so when you look at, who is slow at the combine, when you're talking big offensive linemen, they're running faster than pretty much the entire rest of the population. And that just makes it stunning to watch. And at the same time, you want to see which linemen jump out the most, because this might actually be the position that I care about the 40-yard dash more than anywhere else, because at least in the last 15 years, especially the tackle position, it seems like a lot of times the guys that are running in the 4.7s, 4.8s, low 4.9s, a lot of times those guys end up being the ones that are the really good players in the NFL. There seems to be more of a correlation with the 40-yard dash to especially the tackle positions.
No question about it. Now that Pete Carroll is no longer a head coach in the NFL, Chris Peterson is no longer a head coach in college football, I feel a little bit more comfortable in sharing this publicly. I've had conversations with them and others on their respective staffs, and they both were strong proponents of the idea of offensive tackles in particular, but offensive linemen in general, having times under 5 seconds in the 40-yard dash. And again, I mean, that just seems, counterintuitive. It's the biggest guys on the field, and the 40-yard dash matters for them, but not for running backs or wide receivers, But what it does speak to is, number one, just the sheer athletic ability, obviously. Also speaks to conditioning and technique, because it is an unnatural thing for a guy of that size to get down low in a sprinter stance and be able to explode out of their stance like that, to be able to have a time that fast. So, Corbin, that to me was one of the huge storylines of this year's combine is, as you said, everybody's going to focus in on the so-called skill position players. And I understand it. That some of the draft analysts out there that have a great deal of respect for, that they're focusing a lot on these skill position players. It's just, you're going to get more Twitter followers if that's what you want. If you say that the wide receivers are special this year, the cornerbacks are special this year, they're good. The best positional group, at least what was demonstrated at the combine, was the offensive tackles. I think that what I saw on, over the weekend, watching the combine workouts, is that there should be at least 6 offensive tackles that go within the first round this year. That is very likely then to be the positional group that leads all groups, all positions when it comes to the first round. And I think that they're going to go in order. Francis Mayoga from Miami, Spencer Fano from Utah, Morgan Freeling from Georgia, Max Iheanacho from Arizona State. By the way, that would be the first Arizona State offensive tackle selected in the first round in 23 years since Levi Jones. Caden Proctor from Alabama, Blake Miller from Clemson, who had a phenomenal workout, and possibly Caleb Lomu from Utah as well. And that's 7 offensive tackles. And I think all 7 of them could wind up going in the first round. Again, the first 6, I think, are almost shoo-ins at this point. They, to me, stole the show. I've got a sleeper tackle out there that I want to kind of talk about here for a moment. And Enrique Cruz from Kansas, who I thought had arguably the best workout of any of the tackles this year. 6'05", so 6'5.5", 313 pounds, 33 3/4 inch arms, 10 1/4 inch hands, so good hand size, 4.94 40-yard dash with a 1.74 split. That was among the elite ones. A 35-inch vertical jump, 9.8 broad jump, and you watch him as positional workout and the way that he slid laterally. Corbin, again, I think that the offensive tackle class might just be the best positional group at this entire draft, but no one wants to talk about the big guys.
Well, you just stole my thunder a little bit, because Cruz is going to be a guy that I was going to mention the tackle spot, because 35-inch vertical jump at that size is just insane. But I want to mention this rather than just, individual players. Fano from Utah is going to be the one I reference here, but 4.91 40-yard dash was the second fastest among offensive linemen in this combine. Ian Acker from Arizona State, 4.91, same time. You just mentioned both those guys are probably very strong candidates to go in the first round. That's two of the top three offensive linemen in the 40-yard dash in this combine. And then you have Enrique Cruz, who was only a couple spots below them at 4.94 seconds. Like, there is a correlation here. Like, I always look at the 40-yard dash when I'm talking about tackles because Lane Johnson really got that movement going. But ever since then, we have seen, I mean, Charles Cross for the Seahawks is a great example of that, what he did his pro day workout. Like, you are looking for guys that have that explosiveness that also can, that movement skill. It seems to translate from the 40 with the fluidness that we see with these guys. And it's incredibly important. But I want to talk about a guy that was near the bottom of the list here. And look, again, 5.36 second 40-yard dash. Most human beings in the world are not running that fast. But Markel Bell, the big tackle from Miami, he's almost 380 pounds. Like, this man is massive. I believe he's almost 6'8", and he's 380 pounds. He is he looks like somebody you would create on Madden. And for him to run a 5.36 40, that was as impressive as seeing Fano and some of those other guys run in the low 4.9s, because that is incredible twitch for a player is a couple Big Macs away from 380. That was, to me, one of the most impressive things that I saw in this entire combine. And there's going to be some people say, but he's not in that threshold. But I'm looking at a guy like that thinking, especially watching the position drills, he's pretty darn light in his feet for a guy that size. I was just extremely impressed by the twitch for a player that is built that way to go in and do that. That was just freakish to me.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, I thought that you were going to be referencing Alabama's Caden Proctor. I mean, for him to have a 5.21 second 40-yard dash, a 32.5-inch vertical jump at 352 pounds. And look, this is not exactly science that we're talking about here, but just watch the guys of that size run. If you don't see much jiggle and you're 350 plus pounds, then just think about the weight distribution we're talking about there. I mean, how big, how physically put together are these men? It just really is remarkable. We're talking about Bell, talking about Proctor, or some of the other true buffet bashers of this draft class. And look, I mean, obviously, when you think about the Seahawks specifically, you're taking a kind of the micro approach with Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas, and some good young talent, in kind of developing behind them. I don't know that tackle necessarily is the hugest position of concern, but I look at some of the guards in this class, and there's some really intriguing athletes out there. So if you're looking for guys that maybe could be an Anthony Bradford type, or somebody who could push Anthony Bradford, I guess I should say, a couple of kind of sleepers that I think that people should be considering. Jude Bowery played tackle at Boston College, but I think that he might slide inside, but he's got the athletic ability. His 1.75 second 10-yard split to me was a very impressive number, especially considering his frame. Jalen Farmer from Kentucky, exact same thing. And then one of my favorite interior blockers, now most view him strictly as a center, but Logan Jones from Iowa might have just been the most impressive offensive lineman in terms of just pure athletic ability as far as anybody that tested this year. So again, this is a draft class. I know it's not the positional group that everybody wants to talk about, but I thought that the biggest reason why, or the biggest difference that we saw this season from the Seahawks, and obviously they won a ring, was the fact that they were abysmal in pass protection and in run blocking 2 years ago. And then they saw this massive improvement a year ago. Kudos to John Benton, Rick Dennison, et cetera, et cetera. I think that this draft class has a lot of quality offensive linemen that could make sure the Seahawks continue to be that effective along the offensive line.
And I want to mention the name Kalen Rutledge just to close things out, because Kalen Rutledge from Georgia Tech had a very impressive day. The 7.54 second 3-cone drill at 300 plus pounds, very twitchy, athletic, change of direction. That's the kind of player, you're looking at zone blocking schemes. The agility drills really matter a lot too. if you're talking about gap schemes, I think that, the 40-yard dash and the explosiveness matter a little bit more. But I think the agility testing, when you're talking about zone blocking, that is a guy, Kalen Rutledge, that tested well across the board. He had one of the best combines in these offensive linemen. But if you're looking for somebody that can immediately push or jump over Anthony Bradford and you pick him early in the draft, I think he's clearly a day 2 guy. That is your opportunity to be able to plug in him into that competition. And you could have maybe a rookie plunging into there next year, but then you would have all your starters for the next 3 years minimum working together. So I think that's something the Seahawks will be considering. We'll have to wait and see when we get to the draft in late April. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back tomorrow, all of our listeners are going to love hearing these 2 words, mock draft. We are going to have a dueling mock draft coming your way, the first one this offseason for Locked On Seahawks. Rob and I are going to dish out our first mocks with just 4 picks apiece. We're not doing any trades. It's going to be 4 players each, but we are going to scrutinize each other's drafts, and we're going to have a lot of fun with that. Make sure to listen in and enjoy the rest of your Monday. Go Hawks.